Welcome to Impact Duty. I'm your host, Manisha Dadlani Kripalani, bringing you empowering stories of friends and people I admire. Their voices have given me joy and the momentum to share their stories with you. Nikhil Merchant is aptly named the Nonchalant Gourmand. He is a writer, blogger, gastronome, and cooks up a storm at the drop of a hat. He fuels his passion by serving as a restaurant consultant, especially on menu and design, and dabbles in collaborations with top chefs. Don't miss out on Nikhil's foodie adventures documented in the Nonchalant Series. Nikhil Merchant, welcome to Impact Duty. How are you doing?
Hello. Hi. Nice to be on Impact Duty.
It's a pleasure to have you. You know, I've been waiting to have you on this platform for quite a while.
Yeah.
So I'm finally glad that we're making this happen. And Nikhil Merchant, for
Awesome. Yeah, likewise.
and for those of the audience that don't know who you are, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words?
Well, sure. So I'm a food writer. If I was to, the first thing which comes into my mind, but I do multiple things with food. So I am part of the food industry. I am a gourmet consultant. I consult restaurants and bars. I help people set off their menus. And I also write, which is how my career started. And then pretty much all of that together. And I am also a recipe developer. So I do a lot of stuff on my social media feeds in a way, which I've been doing for a while. Earlier, it used to be a blog, and now it's all digital. Of course, I mean, blogs are digital, but I'm talking about like video and pictorial format. So
Right.
It's all kind of coming together. Yeah.
Yes, and there's a lot that you do. Okay. So I got renowned chef, cuisine artist, food journalist, okay, just to name a few things. Okay, but how did this journey or how did the seed get planted? When did it begin and how did you set all this in action?
Well, as a lot of stories go with people who are in the food industry, I know for a fact that I started off at a really young age. I always
Really?
loved cooking. I always loved, being in the kitchen when I was like maybe 8 or 9. I come from
Wow.
a sort of joint family earlier. Now, of course, we are like all, you know, parts of the world and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
when we were younger, there were a lot of more people, like there were a lot more family members, and we'd land up, cooking all day long. And then I'd always find myself in the kitchen with people, our cooks, maybe my grandma, people around me. And it's always fascinating, right? So
Uh-huh.
that was actually a very formative years, if one was to call it. And then
Hmm.
I started cooking when I was 11 and 12, when I started like literally going into the kitchen and creating stuff, going
Right.
through books. We didn't have internet at that time. So,
Right.
I mean, when you think about it, you didn't have a lot of inspirations except from books and
Hmm.
maybe TV to an extent, where you had
Hmm.
some of these places, some of these channels showing cooking from abroad. So
Right.
I remember this clearly because we are vegetarian home, even though I cook now everything outside.
Right.
And I've grown vegetarian. And I would be very fascinated with these people cooking like pot roast and roast
Yes.
chicken, or, like fish and fresh from the sea. Like I would see all of those things happening. And I couldn't bring meat back at home, right?
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
would try and create vegetarian versions of that, even though it's
Right.
difficult. I would take inspirations from, like the what do you call the ingredients used, maybe the marinades or the sauces or whatever, and try and replicate it, even though we didn't have an influx of so many ingredients in India. So
Right.
I would somehow put things together, and that's how I realized that I can create food out of something which is not, like people are used to. And
Hmm.
that's when the whole journey towards all of this started. Um, I was brought up traditionally in the sense my education was very traditional, like most
Mm-hmm.
Indian people are. Like you go to your graduation, your post graduation, you get your masters, you start getting into business. There's nobody in my family who was in the food business. So
Right.
there was no mentor as such, right? So we never pushed towards that direction. But
Right.
hearts of hearts, I knew I loved cooking and I
Okay.
wanted to do something around food and hospitality, but I never
Mm-hmm.
had an opportunity to go in the education way, like, getting taught
Mm-hmm.
for it because,
Exactly. Like formal
you know,
education in cooking and
yeah,
hospitality.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I never even like it never even occurred to me that I should be doing that. And, there was nobody around me to even uh, push me towards that direction, or even me realizing that there is something which I can do with catering, or go to catering college or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And where
So,
were these
what
formative years, Nikhil? Where were these formative years? Like, where
in
did you grow up?
in
In
Mumbai,
Mumbai. Okay.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's fully cosmopolitan. So you think
Yes.
about it, like you're exposed to a lot of different cultures, people, stuff like that. So it was in a way an easier way for me to do things.
Mm-hmm.
But what happening is I started working for like different companies. I was handling like manufacturing units to like sales and marketing to like
Mm-hmm.
business development and stuff like that. But hearts of hearts, I always was, going towards the food direction. And
Right.
something clicked in me. This was around 2006.
Right.
And I recollect that I used to read a lot. So, I was
Uh-huh.
always looking for information food on newspapers or in magazines or whatever, right? And I realized that a lot of um, information which was out there was straight up recipes. There was no informative stuff about food.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I felt that I have like researched and I have learned some new things. And why aren't they being spoken about? So
Mm-hmm.
I penned a piece, a story,
Right.
and I sent it out to like a couple of editors and
Uh-huh.
like random, like it was a cold sort of emails. It's easy to find emails from, of editors from newspapers and stuff like that. And sending a little note saying that, I feel like this is the kind of stories which should be brought out. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I can contribute a little bit. I don't know how to go about it, but I guess, writing to you would help. And then an editor picked it up and
Right.
he's like, I'm going to publish this on Saturday. And it turned out to be the second largest newspaper circulated in India, not just
Mm-hmm.
Bombay. And
Right.
printed it. Then they came back to me um, the next, I think, 2 or 3 days and said, would you be able to write another one? And I'm like,
Right.
oh, yeah, sure. And then I landed up writing for them for a year and a half every single week.
Lovely.
And that's how the whole like I got so much inspiration and confidence that
Mm-hmm.
uh 6 months I think I started writing blogs.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that was the thing at that time. Out here you had access to the internet, you had people to I mean go back to and talk about. I didn't know anything about the blogging world at all, but I just opened up, I think it was Blogspot. Oh, yeah,
Uh-huh.
it was Blogspot. And I was just thinking up, in the night, I was thinking, oh, I can write in newspapers. I should start my own web page. And
Right.
I landed up creating this name in my head, which is Nonchalant Gourmand. And I signed up for a URL, which is all free, and then just started
Right.
writing blog. And and that's when I got connected to a lot of the first time food bloggers in India,
Right.
which
Uh-huh.
included Kalyan. I saw your interview with him, and
Right.
it ended up being, interesting because there was a blogger meetup, which was done by another blogger who I think I really respect, and I feel like she's done an amazing job through the years. Her name is Rushina, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and she's the one who was like the mother hen. She got like all of us bloggers together for a meal at a hotel, which had
Right.
its restaurant being launched or whatever. Or I think it was a new, yeah, it was a new restaurant being launched at that hotel, and we ended
Mm-hmm.
up going there, like about I think we were 15, 20 of us,
Mm-hmm.
all first time bloggers. In fact, some of them have been already writing. And
Right.
that's where the whole thing just shot off, because then we started getting more material to talk about, and started getting more invites. We started exploring stuff on our own and talking about the things we've explored. We all are foodies in a way. So, we would, when you go out and eat, you're always looking for something new. And we had all those experiences to actually put it somewhere now. So
Right.
a combination of, blogging and newspapers sort of got me into this whole space as a start. So that was my
Excellent.
journey. It's been a while.
Excellent. Excellent, Nikhil. And like you said, you have a very apt name, the Nonchalant Gourmand.
Yeah.
But it's also a bit of a tongue twister. Okay, so do you have
It,
people do you have people having a hard time saying it?
I think not really. It's surprising that people actually get it. I think maybe I've been around too long, and I think people have already like kind of got used to the name.
Uh-huh.
Earlier it used to be a little difficult, I guess, first, because they're like, wow,
Right.
what's with this name and why you so and like, are you not writing about Indian food? And I'm like, no, I'm not actually. And that's what it turned
Mm-hmm.
out to be, because I felt like for me, cooking has to be like easy. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to. I mean, as much as cooking is all about rules and ingredients and measures and stuff like that, I never started cooking that way, because
Right.
I never had the opportunity to measure out stuff which was being uh, put out. You know, uh, how do I say? Like, I don't think all the recipes I came across in my own little way, which is not through the internet all the time, uh,
Right.
it landed up being, stuff which I would just think and put together. And I felt like if I can do it, I feel people don't have to make it so complicated, and you can be
Mm-hmm.
nonchalant about it. And that's where the first part of my, and then it went to gourmand, because I
Uh-huh.
felt like, oh, I'm doing a little fancier stuff. I was recreating
Right.
salads, Caesar salads, like that time when we never had it on menus out here at all, and I was fascinated with
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've talked about stuff which was never made in India. And I
Right.
would, that Caesar salad, for example, it's one of my first few
Mm-hmm.
recipes which I made when I started blogging.
Mm-hmm.
It has anchovies, right?
It has
And
anchovies, exactly.
yeah, so we couldn't bring anchovies here, and I know that a lot of my audience never were not meat eaters or seafood eaters. So
Mm-hmm.
I learned that there's a substitute called Worcestershire sauce. Like, I mean, you had the vegetarian version out here too, which India makes, and use that
Oh.
in putting together dressing for Caesars, and that kind of became like this big, thing for me. And I felt like, okay, if I can do it, I feel people can just use, slightly more uh, nuanced approach to cooking and not just make it so complicated. And that's how
Mm-hmm.
that's how the name came
The
about.
name came about. And the other thing I've heard you use is the word gastronome. Is there a difference between a gourmand and a gastronome? And educate me. So is
Yeah,
there a
yeah,
difference?
there is. So, while I won't get into the nitty-gritty of talking about what gourmand and gastronome does, but
Uh-huh.
the transition happened when I decided that I'm not just going to be talking about food as a passion,
Hmm.
but I'm going to be actively involved with it.
Right.
It's going to cover a lot more than just finer, refined cooking. It
Hmm.
can topics from street food to, I mean, I cook street food too. It's not like
Hmm.
I'm only cooking
Yes.
stuff. So it's more about the in-depth understanding of the industry, rather than
Hmm.
just being somebody who knows how food.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's a lot more in-depth um, insight into the food world, rather than just a sort of like, I just eat and I just enjoy good food. I think I
Hmm.
go down
Hmm.
from right to, if I'm learning a recipe, I go down to like the origins and the history of it. I always want to know where it was first made before I actually get down to could recreating it, or
Great.
seeing versions of it being recreated. Like, who would know that
Hmm.
Caesar salad has such a Roman name, could be from Mexico,
Hmm.
right?
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
There,
Oh, I didn't know that. And that is one of
yeah,
my
so there was
favorite
this
salads.
It
Okay,
is. It's
so
not. It's not American or European. It's actually.
uh-huh,
It was born in a Mexican restaurant in Mexico, and there was this guy who was just making these long, and they usually come like the lettuce is never chopped up. It
uh-huh,
is served whole, and then they put the dressing on it, and they put the croutons, and they shave Parmesan, and then you eat it.
right.
So it's kind of like a. I mean, if you look at the origins, that's how you would serve it. And when I actually made it with like
Uh-huh,
without chopped up lettuce, and I did it this way. I don't know. It was
right.
just a different feel. Like imagine, one of your how do I say, like a lettuce wrap, but
Mm-hmm.
then you have salad dressing instead, and something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Like it's so cool, right? Like when you go down to thinking
totally.
about how recipes are actually created and what they turn
Mm-hmm.
into when you look at it
Mm-hmm.
from a commercial point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I like. I have always believed in, and whenever I create something or I'm making recipes, I really want to know where they come from.
Come from.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and why do they exist? Like who's the one who made it first? And now all this information is so easily available online, you
Right.
know. So I feel it just makes me a lot more involved with the
Uh-huh.
industry. It gives me so much more information to pass on because that's what I want to do. Like I want to create whatever I make is a means of knowledge transfer to people.
Lovely.
So that gives me the highest satisfaction to know that somebody else is learning something from it. Um, whether it's food knowledge or it's recipes which are being created.
Uh-huh.
And why do they exist? So I feel that's how storytelling also works, and it kind of all comes together.
Beautiful, Nikhil. And I do know that you talk a lot about local produce as well. There are quite a few videos on your Instagram page. Tell us a little bit more of why this is so important and why it's so much more important in India. Okay, let's take India into context and why is using local produce and why have you highlighted this so much on your page?
So there are two or three ways to look at it, and there are reasons for it. I think one is this whole global move which is happening. I feel right from environmental factors to global warming to dietary changes to overconsumption. I feel when you have more options around you, you
Right.
tend to consume more.
Hmm.
Just like anything, you do tend to get confused because after a certain point, your thoughts are not, like, oh, I want to have this, or I'm so used to this diet, I should be having this, right? I
Right.
also am a big believer on right now, like the amount of processed food which is coming out in the market.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
not
Yeah.
conducive to your health. We've never grown up eating so much processed. I mean, we would eat
Hmm.
like some packaged stuff, but a lot of it on a daily basis was stuff which you made fresh at home, and that was what our diet was, and that's how we've grown up eating, right?
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of our issues today with like, and I know a lot of people have gut issues, including myself, and I feel it's to do with the extra process and overconsumption which is happening around. I mean, I may be the
Hmm.
last person to talk about this also because my job involves going and eating all the time.
Hmm.
But having
Hmm.
said that, I feel that people should, for the most part, of say a week, right? You have
Hmm. Hmm.
meals in a week. I feel for at least 60 to 70% of that time, you should be eating something which is grown within your parameters or your periphery. And
Mm.
when I say that, it could be stuff which you could even grow at home, like herbs and stuff, or you could be picking up stuff from the local market. And
Hmm.
I feel like that is the freshest way to get good nutrients coming to you. Because the
Hmm.
moment you start thinking about like, no, I'm gonna have Thai today, I'm gonna have Mexican tomorrow, I'm gonna have Italian day after, you're gonna be stocking up on all those ingredients. You're gonna be buying packaged stuff because not everything is available here. Like
Hmm.
for example,
Hmm.
you're not gonna get fresh rosemary and I mean now you do, but like certain ingredients like chives and whatever, like
Yeah.
tarragon
Yeah.
stuff like that. You're gonna buy a
Right.
bottle of it, and it's gonna sit in your pantry, and you're gonna probably use it for one recipe, two recipes, and you're gonna leave it there. Instead, why not change your thought process of
Hmm.
of creating stuff with stuff around you? And I feel people are missing that. Like they don't go to the market today because everything is on your phone where you look through,
Yes.
okay, I want tomato, I want this, that, and you just know that much. But when you go to the market, you're actually seeing stuff which inspires you to cook, and that's how I've learned cooking, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I feel that is the number one reason is you need to have access to your local produce and also use it as much as possible you can for your daily cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think you should be cooking from stuff all around the world and trying to, recreate stuff when you know everything is there. Second is also substitutions. Like just an example I gave about Caesar salad, right? Like now today, if you
Right.
don't have a certain ingredient, I feel there are ways to do it or change your recipe. So again, you
Mm-hmm.
have to look in what you have around you before you actually go on to create something authentic when you want to do it for yourself or even a little party at home.
Sorry. Yeah.
The third main thing which changed my life was while I was working for these different companies and industries across, I always veered towards the more food driven ones. So while there was one company I used to work for which did sugar as trading. We would send sugar all around the world and we would work with sugar farmers, like
Right.
sugarcane farmers. I never got down to the farm level, but I understood the trade level of it, right? My next
Right.
step was to actually get to the farm level. So an
Aha.
opportunity with a non-profit organization came into my lab when I wanted to
Aha.
switch careers. And this NGO was called Shop for Change, and they had a fair trade certification mandate for India. So they were
Lovely.
already established for about 2 years, where they
Aha.
were certifying farmers for cotton. And then when I came on board was when they wanted to shift to agro. So
Okay.
what happened in that is they wanted somebody to drive that because somebody needs to understand the food, needs to go to the farm level, also needs to understand what to do with that produce when it comes, to kind of create those marketing, that market chains or the
Mm-hmm.
whatever mandate at that time. So I spent about, I think, 3 years
Mm-hmm.
um, sort of working on that project and literally going around India to
Mm-hmm.
the little farms because all these farmers had to be farm owners who are less than an acre of land. So again,
Oh,
you're looking
really?
at these remote places in India, which you go to and see, like, what are they growing? And then it took me to a lot of cities and states and towns and villages, which included like vanilla farmers in Kerala,
Oh.
to like stone fruit and almonds and like those kind of seeds grown in the north. And I
Mm-hmm.
explored like all of these amazing produce which India has, and I'm thinking to myself like these guys don't even have, most of them don't have the means to find a way to reach this produce. Like apricots, fresh apricots from Uttaranchal, it's very difficult for it to even find themselves in Bombay. Like you won't find fresh
Yeah.
apricots in Bombay. They get spoiled, right?
Yeah. For sure.
But the idea was to create stuff for them from their area. Like, they'd make like preserves and they'd make, like apricot oil for your body or even for
Really.
consumption, like almond oil and stuff like that. And and that's how you would bring this kind of produce to India or even
Aha.
create export plans for them. So I felt like we have such a vast agro industry in general, and we have
Right.
such amazing produce coming out. And this I'm talking about before this whole movement of local and hyper local and whatever was happening, like people started taking notice. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like
Mm-hmm.
it was much before that, and I felt like people were not giving enough justice to the produce which is available in India. So
Mm-hmm.
I've always, in my own little way, kind of created. I always propagate those kind of messages in little subtle ways. I don't. It's not in your face. I don't think people realize it when I say that. Oh, let's just pick this tomato and have from here and make this salsa out of it using Kashmiri chilies or whatever chili I found in the market, and they'd
Right.
make it and recreate it, and they'd be like, "Wow, this turned out so good." And I'd be like, "Yeah, you don't need to depend on a chipotle chili from Mexico. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to go buy.
Mm-hmm.
You can easily do something here which will change those flavor profiles and make it yours. Like you don't
Yeah.
have to all the time be that. I mean, I understand if there's a restaurant doing authentic food, or a business which is creating authentic stuff, then yes. But if you are cooking at home for your own self, then there are ways to make good food tasty and yet live,
Right.
with that. So
Wonderful, wonderful. And taking us to mentors and inspirational forces in and out of the industry, who have been some of them for you?
it's it's hard to pick because I feel everybody who I've come across in my life stream of work, and I'll give you several examples, and I may not take names because I'll tell you they are divided industry wise. So I felt like growing up while I was cooking, I had access to like Tadla Dalal books, right?
Yes.
Like Tadla
Yes.
Dalal is like an in her cooking, and her uh, she kind of bridged the gap at some point. I felt in her own little way that this continental food is what this thing was, where she brought like European or American classics and then actually created Indian versions of them.
Right.
And it was all in her books. Like, I mean, she'd have recipes, which were fancy, like what is it, like a mac and cheese bake, but it had veggies in it, and it had like this of like local cheese, and she put like ketchup and like like green peppers on top. Like, I mean, who does that, right?
Yeah.
We'd eat that because I was like, oh, we are making Italian today, which is actually this baked dish, and it's not actually Italian. It's our own version of it. So I felt like she was a great gap between me thinking differently. Like I'm like, oh, it's possible to do out here. You don't need an oregano seasoning powder to go in, or basil. Like, who even heard of basil at that time? So it's like she really, in my formative years, I felt like she kind of sort of, changed my thought process. And then, of course, TV chefs were another, they were international as well as, Indian chefs who did that. And then a lot of cookbook authors came into my purview because as and when people realize that I'm fond of cooking, there'd be like random books from all around the world coming into my house for gifts, as gifts, like whenever there's a birth, give me like recipe books, like, oh, here, have fun, with this, so you'll enjoy it. So those are those years. And now when I look at my the whole writing phase, I feel my biggest inspirations come from the chefs I meet at restaurants and hotels who I go and talk to and try their food. I feel like because they know I love cooking, it's very easy for me to kind of have access to their kitchen. A lot of journalists also don't need to go straight into the kitchen to understand the process. They are like, I think, it's more superficial, where they want to understand what the concept is, what the theme is, what kind of food, where's his inspiration from. Whereas I'm more interested in knowing his techniques, more on where are his ingredients coming from, what is happening, like what is his historical background. And that's what opens up the kitchen for me, where I'm like, oh, I want to meet your team members, or I want to meet, the rest of the team and just not the owners of the restaurant. And I felt like when I had access to those kitchens, it would open up a world of recipes also, because most chefs are like willingly open to share, their secrets and their kitchen secrets. So I feel that's been a major.
I'm surprised to hear that.
Yeah,
I'm kind of surprised to hear that. That's a refreshing, thought to hear, that they're actually open to sharing. That's beautiful, Nikhil.
No, they are. They're always open to sharing. If I have to ask something like today, I mean, maybe because I've known people and I've spoken about them a long time, but I don't think any chef will be like guarded about his recipes as such. Like I feel that I think for the most part, it's an open book. It's not like somebody's created something of their own. And I feel most chefs realize that. They're like, okay, we are cooking it this way. I'm happy to share secrets if you're interested in it. Like, I mean, so I feel like all of them have been like massive mentors and inspiration to learning. Always curious to know how a certain thing is made. And then I incorporate it in my regular cooking. It comes down to it.
Lovely. And so like you juggle a lot of hats. Okay. So there's food creation, food reviewing, restaurant consulting. There's a lot that you juggle. Do you think it's which out of all the hats that you juggle is the most difficult in your opinion? And do you think it was easier to juggle these hats before a couple of decades ago, or do you think current India is a better space to switch all these hats around in?
I felt consultancy also was difficult, and now as much. I feel people are a lot more, especially people, restaurateurs today. When they are creating their projects, I feel they know what they want. But the reason they're getting a consultant on board is they want that assurance and that direction which they want to take. So in that sense, it gives me an open hand in creating stuff for them and saying that this is work because I know I've been around for so long now that I understand what it is that taking your concept and your thoughts and then creating something out of it and show you that direction. Whereas earlier, there were a lot of people who were just getting consultants on board to just, kind of like create a menu out of nowhere and then kind of inputting saying, but I want this too and I want that too. And I think we should have mindedness at that point. I today are a lot more open to opinions, feedback, which they know make a business successful. So I feel like the consultancy business is a complicated part of my life. I feel like that is where you're trying to balance, you're consistently balancing out all the aspects to make it a success because I don't think I want to be part of any project which fails, right? Just like the owner who's putting in the money or the founder, like he's pumping in the money or the investors, whoever, I don't think they want to lose either. So it's a win-win. It's a win-win. It cannot be like, okay, I just created something because if my name is associated with something, I want it to be a success.
For sure.
And that's where I feel, it's kind of like challenging. But if I was to take what is challenging now, I feel the food writing space is slightly more dispersed. I feel it's kind of gone all over the place. I feel people are short attention span, so nobody wants to see, like long form writing. And I do tell stories which are longer. I mean, I don't know if you've seen my Instagram post. You see that I talk a little extra. I write a little extra than I'm supposed to. But I've never created these platforms. I feel to appease anyone. I feel like it's my personal diary where I'm recording this and I'm creating something for them. For people whoever is willing, a willing audience. And there are enough people out there, even though there are a small niche of them, right? So I feel food writing today is changing. I feel a lot of the emphasis is on short form videos. A lot of it is on like quick, tips and tricks. And, okay, I just want to know whatever you have to say in like 2 lines. I mean, there are stories which wider spread. So I feel my writing has cut down, but at the same time, I think my writing is still more substantial, like a lot more quality and substantial information to it. So, like for example, I write this piece. I mean, I write occasionally for Financial Express, which is a complete business news. But they have a food section which runs once in a couple of fortnights, and they've given me like 2 whole pages in a newspaper. Not like literally. So that's because they want stories like that, and that's the kind of stories I want to do because it takes me a month to finish researching, talking to people, and including like different aspects which come around, and then piece together. So that's the kind of stuff which I like to do, and I feel like that has like I used to write a lot more like that before. I feel now it's kind of it's not that how do I say, it's not that concentrated and important anymore. I feel print is going, it's not going out of fashion, it's just that there's not enough people who are willing to read through it.
To invest.
Yeah, and digitally, everybody, you have to have stories which you can read on a phone like this instead of like that. So I mean, just think about it. Like when you have the whole page, 2 pages in front of you, you're looking at a lot of information which you're waiting to read. When you have stuff in
Right.
such a small, you want to see that much, and then you're done with that information because you swipe on to the next thing. So I it's my ways now of trying to communicate information without being too informative. It's kind of
Yeah.
ironic,
Yeah,
but
it's a
yeah,
sad shift that we've seen. We've seen a sad shift, a move towards shortening our pieces of writing. I mean, even just reading
mm,
a normal book is it's just so seldom done with the next generation. And I really hope we have some kind of revival. Tell us a little bit about the current hospitality industry. Why do you think it's a space still to be explored? And do you think there are any restaurants, in your opinion, that set the standard or are benchmarks for you?
right. So I'll start with talking about the hospitality industry. I feel it's massively changed in the last few years,
Hmm.
especially after the pandemic. I
Hmm.
felt during the pandemic, from what I know, is a lot of cloud kitchens showed up.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
in India, I would say, and it was a great model for people because cloud kitchens don't really need a space to entertain anybody. You don't have to come in to dine, or you're basically supplying. You're doing like deliveries or whatever, which worked during the pandemic because India was not used to ordering in all the time. Like people cook at home, people have
Hmm.
staff help them create food, or there are people, and that's a huge industry in itself because that would be lost
Hmm.
otherwise. There are these people whose lives depend on these jobs which create food for other families at home. So I
Right.
felt like cloud kitchens changed that because a lot of people were cooking at home. Their staff had also gone away because they were not working. They had to go back to
Right.
their villages, so people were stuck. Even though they were at home, they couldn't cook as much, and they were craving new experiences and cuisines. You couldn't travel. Like if you wanted Mediterranean food, it's not like you're going to go to Italy tomorrow and eat it.
Right.
So a lot of cloud kitchens took on that. Um, you know, uh, I felt
That
that gap.
gap.
I started
Mm.
filling it with all these different cuisines from around the world. And it suddenly became like this thing, like people have access to everything now, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
they became such success stories that now people have gone the more authentic way. They are going, they want to create experiences around food which relate to stuff you would get, or maybe when you go to that country or city.
Hmm.
And then it's being like this huge shift in people's perception as well as restaurants, where they are
Right.
now looking at, okay, no, we want to create authentic experiences. We want to create traditional experiences. Nobody wants, a Thai curry, which is typical thick, and, they want to make it like how they had it in Thailand, because that's, that's
Exactly.
something they miss. So I felt like in the form of like slightly more traditional, back to the roots sort of recipes, these kind of restaurants are doing it. A lot of restaurants are also doing local produce. As I said
Hmm.
before, it wasn't such a big thing. Now suddenly it's like millets, and India is so
Hmm.
great in its
Hmm.
that they want to get in and stuff like that. So the chefs have started cooking with it. So I feel like there are many restaurants and chefs who are doing wonderful things. And if I was to name a few, well, so let's stick to that because otherwise I'll go on. Sifa has been doing some amazing Thai food in the city for the
Uh-huh.
last like 7, 8 years and stuff like that. She started off at a luxury hotel as a Thai chef, and then she met her husband there, who's a Japanese chef also, and
Oh,
they both pretty much started their own restaurant called Seafood. They're doing like Asian sort of food, which is more Thai and Japanese, and
lovely.
they've been a great success. So I feel like her food is. Her Thai food really, really stands out because she's consistently bringing in a lot of micro cuisines from Thailand into her dishes here without making it too like, oh, I'm too authentic or whatever. As
Uh-huh.
comfort
Uh-huh.
food. A lot of Indian chefs are doing what they have to with Indian food. There's Vikram Arora. There's, I think, I mean, all these ITC chefs, they are doing some amazing, like they've continued our heritage of Indian food, and they just things popping into my head. But I'm just, I know these are places I go to and eat. There are
Uh-huh.
Italian chefs who, are coming down and creating their own recipes out here, bringing in real authentic Indian Italian experiences from like smaller towns in Italy. So there's
Right.
Romano's, amazing. It's JW Marriott in
Mm-hmm.
Sahar. Yeah. And then yeah, I feel um there's so many actually. There's Gauri
Mm-hmm.
Devi Dayal who's done Max Street Kitchen guys who have changed the way people perceive Indian food again. There's my fine dine, concept which is started 15 years ago in Delhi and now it's in Bombay finally. So
Mm-hmm.
all these people are actually bringing around slight changes into how people eat and should be eating. I feel, yeah, and
Wonderful.
there are several more if I was to think about, but I could go on and on.
Sure, sure, I could as well. So I finally made my way to Bombay a couple of months ago. I was there earlier this year, and I was astounded at the shift and change
Yeah,
in Mumbai. You know, it's there's a lot happening over there. Yeah, in all forms, whether it's local Indian food. So just to
yeah,
name one that I went to while I was there, thanks to Kalyan's post on, it was a restaurant called Folk in Kalagoda.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
This
so I
is
went there.
yeah,
Okay, so Kalyan wrote something about it, and based on that, I landed in Bombay and went to that restaurant, and I was very impressed. And there's just a lot going on right now. So I just think it's a world, in my opinion, a world to be explored and still not saturated. But with that, moving on to chefs and the term celebrity chefs, what does that mean to you? Does it mean anything? Is it a term that's still used? Is it a term that's overused? Tell us your opinion.
um, yeah. I think there are TV chefs, the
Hmm.
ones who make them felt in front of a TV. Their main purpose, I feel, is to educate because I know I used to watch a lot of TV and cooking shows at one point. Um, I never got down to realizing what they are all about till you actually start reading about them and then probably tasting their actual cooking. And I'm not
Hmm.
saying it's bad. But I'm just saying like it's it's for TV. There's a lot which
Right.
goes into creating a recipe on TV, right?
Hmm.
So it's I think more about how you present it, what are you presenting, and what are you communicating, rather than
Hmm.
the passion which goes. Like I'm just saying on a generic
On
point
a
of
large
view.
scale.
So
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, on a large scale. I'm not saying they're bad chefs or whatever. I'm just saying
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
it's a job. Like they're
Hmm.
creating all of this information to be passed on to a huge audience, right? So you're
Right.
also looking at stuff which is appealing to the masses and not a niche crowd to an extent. So I feel like all of this put together, it's just like another actor, or
Uh-huh.
another, person, a TV personality, which I feel has taken the shape of something called a celebrity chef because they also have um, multiple ways of doing things apart from just
Hmm.
the recipes. They are also kind of building brands. They're creating stuff around food brands which they
Hmm.
endorse and stuff like that. They also engage
Right.
themselves in different fields of entertainment. In that sense, it is still an entertainment industry. At the end of the
It
day,
is.
so
Yeah.
it's a different genre in a way. So I wouldn't say I take it away from them. There are some chefs who are doing some amazing stuff, and they really cook well because some of them are
Hmm.
my friends, and they have their presence on TV, and I know I've tried their personal cooking, and it's amazing.
Hmm.
So and they
Hmm.
cook so tasty, right? Like I mean, I don't see those recipes translating either in a restaurant or in on TV because maybe that's not for the masses. That's more niche, and
Hmm.
that's more their style. So I feel
Right.
with the celebrity thing, it's a lot going on, and it's a whole
Uh-huh.
package rather than boxing them into one situation. But at the end of the day, they're supposed to entertain, and they are
Yes.
supposed to create that platform of entertainment to provide that information for people. So it's just another foundation for them to do what they do best. And some people are cut out for it. They're cut out for the screen. They have, an amazing
Yes.
screen
Yes.
presence. They have great voices. They know how to deliver. All those are skills. I mean, it's hard to do that. Like, I know I've been on a couple of shows on TV myself as, for something. And uh, I it was very hard for me to act. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
very
Yes.
hard for me to execute. Like today, I'm making it's taken a long time for me to make reels on recipes too, like, and put myself in them. Like, even if you see my reel today, I'll just have like 3 seconds of myself talking about something because I felt like that's the format which is working. Otherwise, my reels were all about the food. I'd never show myself, no see my face, like nobody see, they probably just see my hands. But these TV chefs have that presence, they know how to
Yes.
come up and create that thing for them. So I think they are part of the industry, like major, because they do draw attention to people like us, maybe at the end of the day, like, people looking up. So in a way, it's not a bad thing, but at the same time, people need to know the difference between, what they are set out to do and what they're doing, where actually
Exactly.
what
Yeah.
is. There are other aspects of the cooking world which exist, and people should acknowledge that too. So yeah.
Right. Nikhil, before I say goodbye to you,
Sure.
it's been such a pleasure speaking to you, but I have one more question for you.
Yes.
What would you like to see manifest on a bigger scale, larger scale, or for yourself personally? What would you like to see manifest in the near future?
I feel again, telling stories, maintaining that heritage, maintaining heirloom recipes, maintaining all of this information, uh, which people are known to be experts for, and I include myself in it because I feel I have a lot more knowledge than regular people do. Should this should have a way of not getting lost in all this information which is going out there today. Because people are quick to change and learn something and then keep it behind them. I feel the magic of cooking needs to go back to roots and historical references and origins. I understand new age cooking, novo cuisine, all that is fine. People creating what they are, they're good for what they are known for. But I feel like heritage, culture, all of it needs to come down a little bit more on the ground level, and people need to acknowledge that. For me, I feel that is something which I really want to create a platform for, and also associate, collaborate, do stuff with people who maintain all of this, so that we continue this legacy instead of it just getting washed off. I mean, it's like animals are getting extinct. The day is not far when cuisines also go extinct. Like, when I say the micro cuisines, like they will not exist otherwise if you don't create those home recipes and you create platforms to record all of that. So I hope as they should on a larger scale globally, like just globally. So yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Nikhil, such a pleasure speaking with you today. Really, like I said, right when we started, I was like, I really had been waiting a while to chat with you. So I'm really glad this happened. And thank you for sharing your thoughts, your time, and your inspirational ideas. And we really can't wait to see where you take cuisine and your work.
Thank you so much for having me, though. It was lovely chatting with you. It opened up my thoughts behind also and keep me active as to what I'm thinking about and what am I doing in this world. So that's great. Yeah. All right, Manisha. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you, Nikhil. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.